So, what is Vue Js, or just Vue as it's also called? Vue Js is a JavaScript framework that makes building interactive and reactive web frontends, which are basically web applications that run in the browser, so in the end what the user sees, easier. This is a nice sentence, and it would be a correct definition, but it might not be too helpful. So let me make this a bit clearer, and let's highlight the important parts here. And of course, one important part is JavaScript. Vue.js is for JavaScript, and it uses JavaScript. It's all about JavaScript because JavaScript is the programming language which we can use in the browser. We can run it in the browser after a page was loaded by the user. It allows us to manipulate what the user sees on the screen without fetching a new page from the server. And that allows us to provide rich user experiences, and I'll come back to this rich user experiences point in just a second. But it's not just for JavaScript. Indeed, Vue.js is a JavaScript framework. Now, what does framework mean? Framework, not just in JavaScript, but in any programming language, is basically a third-party library, which means it's code not written by you, but by someone else, which exposes certain utility functionalities, certain methods, certain tools, which you don't have to write on your own. And that's important. Unlike a regular library, a framework is a library that does not just give you those extra functionalities, but which also gives you a set of rules, you could say. It gives you a clear guidance, a clear approach that you should follow when it comes to building your application. It basically gives you a clear idea and structure of how to write your application code. So it's the utility functions plus the rules. Now, why would we use Vue.js? We also have that in the sentence, because with it we can build interactive and reactive web frontends. Reactive is a pretty fancy term, but in the end what it means is that our app should be very responsive to what the user does. If a user enters something on the screen, we want to be able to react to that, for example, to show validation errors below an input field. We want to be able to show overlays with warning messages. We want to give a user a very modern look and feel in our web application. Often we try to achieve what we know from mobile apps, and I'll come back to that as well. So we want to provide a great user experience in the end, and Vue.js makes it easier for us to achieve that. And the web frontends part is also important. This basically means that Vue.js is involved with what the user sees. It's not a server-side framework. We don't use it with PHP or with Node. Well, we can use it with all of that, but simply in a combination, but it doesn't help us write better PHP or Node.js code because Vue.js is for the browser-side JavaScript. With HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and possibly Vue.js in the browser, we can control what the user sees, and we can provide a rich user interface in the web. And Vue.js is a framework that helps us with building such a JavaScript-driven user interface running in the browser for our web application that might be talking to a server, but it's all about the browser-side code that helps us achieve that. Now, why would we use something like Vue.js? Why would we want this reactive web frontend? Well, let's take a step back and let's not think about web applications. Let's think about mobile applications. Mobile applications are very responsive. Things happen instantly. We basically have like one screen where we add overlays, where we render lists. We can navigate to different screens with a smooth animation. It all feels like one unit, you could say. So mobile apps and also desktop apps feel very reactive. We don't have to wait for new pages to load. We don't have to wait for HTML to be downloaded and rendered by the browser. Instead, the entire user interface is already there. The entire user interface is part of the mobile app the user installed. And the only thing that might be loaded behind the scenes is data. Now, in web apps traditionally, we click a link and we wait for a new page to load. And that happens over and over again. We might enter some data in a form, we click a button, that data is submitted, and as a response, we get a new HTML page. So in a traditional web page, we wait for responses all the time. JavaScript can help us here. JavaScript can speed this up, and JavaScript in the browser allows us to provide a more modern web application, a more modern user interface. JavaScript has the huge advantage of running in the browser on the loaded page. That means we have a language running in the browser which can be used to change that page without fetching new HTML behind the scenes. Instead, we can manipulate the HTML structure, the so-called DOM, document object model, of a page with JavaScript. And that means that in modern JavaScript-driven web applications, we're not sending a request to get a new HTML page. Instead, we only do this once, and thereafter, we just exchange data behind the scenes, and we use client-side JavaScript and possibly frameworks like Vue to update what's on the screen. And we're using solutions like Vue Js because just JavaScript may not be ideal. Theoretically, we can build any kind of web application with just vanilla JavaScript. So with just JavaScript without any extra frameworks or libraries. No framework like Vue is needed in reality, but it wouldn't be much fun to use just JavaScript because we have to write all the code, all the logic on our own. We have to reinvent the wheel over and over again. We might even write suboptimal code and introduce errors and bugs because we have to write everything from scratch. And we have to do these things correctly, otherwise we might have poor performance or security issues. Working in a team might also be harder because not everyone knows our code structure, the philosophy behind our code, and how to use our code. And that's why we use something like Vue. It gives us a clear rule set in which we have to work, which everyone in a team has to use, and we don't have to figure out all the small nitty-gritty details like updating a part on the page. Instead, we can focus on our core business logic with Vue and let Vue do the heavy lifting of updating the page and of doing all the annoying stuff which we would have to do otherwise. That's why we use frameworks like Vue, and throughout the course this will become obvious once we dive into all the features Vue offers and how easy those features make it to build amazing web applications and user interfaces.